In this video, I'm going to analyze transactions, then I'm going to journalize those transactions, and then post them to the general ledger in this video and the videos that come after it. So let's get started. A lot of times in problems, you'll see problems that look like this, where there's a series of things that happen in a business, and these resemble things that are going to happen in a real business. These are transactions, and from an accounting standpoint, what we have to do is to figure out what happened and how we can record that in our books. So for this problem, I have and often you'll also see at the bottom a chart of accounts where there's a list of accounts where we can put this stuff, where these transactions might be recorded. Now, formally speaking, in a system where accounts are recorded by hand, the way things will be entered, they'll be entered in the general journal, which is this sheet right here, and then it'll be entered in what's called the general ledger. Let me find where I put that. Here's the first page of my general ledger. In general ledger accounts, and those are the two places where accounts will be recorded. However, for this exercise, I'm going to record things. I'm going to start by putting things in T accounts, and you'll notice here from my chart of accounts, I have these accounts here. I've simply copied these over to T accounts here. And if you're working along with this problem, you might want to pause the video here and set up those T accounts. You'll simply write the title on the chart of accounts into the T account. So if you need to, you can do that now. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to look at each of these transactions here and decide first of all, how can I record this in T accounts? And I'm going to record it in a T account, and then I'm going to record it immediately into my general journal. And as you're doing your problems, I recommend that you do this the same way, where you look at the problem, you analyze it in terms of the T account, and then you record it to the general journal. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is figure out this first transaction here. Felicia Jennings invested $150,000 in her landscaping business. Now, as you're doing these problems, I recommend that you have memorized this chart right here. Accounts that are what are called debit accounts, where they increase on the debit side, and then accounts which are called credit accounts, which increase on the credit side. And there's a couple ways of doing that. Some people remember it by this acronym: after we eat, let's read comics. That's a good way. You just remember the first three are debit accounts and the last three are credit accounts. And then other people remember this as licorice, because people really like licorice. And the acronym is, again, AWE for assets, withdrawals, and expenses. These are the debits. And then liabilities, capital, and revenue. These are the credit accounts. So you have to have this memorized before you can really do transaction analysis well. So this first problem here, Felicia Jennings invested $150,000 in her landscaping business. And the thing we have to ask here first is, well, what happened? And the answer is, first of all, our cash increased, so we're going to have a cash transaction, and also our capital increased, this is ownership in her business. So if we look at our chart here, assets is a debit account and capital is a credit account. So we're going to have a debit to assets and a credit to capital. So here we go. I'm going to label this transaction A, 150,000 in cash. And let me find my capital account. There's my capital account, and 150,000 to capital. So there is my very first transaction. Now let's look at this next one. She spent $2,000 on landscaping supplies. And again, the question, well, what happened? She's going to have less money, and she's going to have more landscaping supplies. So capital went down. And on my T accounts, to make that happen, I'm going to need to put a credit in cash. It's $2,000. There's $2,000. And this is transaction B, landscaping supplies. But landscaping supplies went up in transaction 2. So there's that transaction. And now I'm going to take these first two transactions and record them on the general journal. Now the general journal is formatted a little bit differently than T accounts. Let me get my heading. It's correct here. Felicia's Landscaping Services. There's my title. Here I'm going to have the date, and I don't have dates in these problems, or in this problem here, so I'm just going to stick them in. But normally what we'd have here is we'd have something like this. This would be something that happened on, say, for example, the 1st of the month. Or it could be any time during the month. And on the general journal, I'm going to do things in columns. So I'm going to say May 1st, and this is going to indicate it's the 1st of the month. So come back to my T accounts. Now, the thing about the general journal is that I'm always going to put the debit first. That's the rule on the general journal. And I really have to know what things are. I can't just make it up. So here I go with my first transaction. For this one, cash is a debit. So there's cash, and I'm going to put cash here. And then I'm going to put cash in the debit column. And then for my next transaction, or for my next line here, I'm going to put capital on the next line here. So I'm going to indent a few spaces here. There I am. And I'm going to write capital. And then I'll put capital on the credit side. And I don't need to use this posting reference column just yet. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So I've got my debit on the first line of this transaction, and then for the second line, I've got my credit. So now, in this third line, I'm going to put a description of the transaction. Initial investment in business. And this line here is not as specific as previous lines. I just need to describe what happened. So there's that first transaction. Here's transaction A. I'm going to do transaction B. For this transaction, landscaping services is the first account that I'm going to hit. So I'm going to do that one first. Landscaping services. $2,000. On this next line here, I'm going to write cash, because the debit comes first in the general journal. There I've got the debit, and then on the second line I'm going to put my credit. And then on this third line, as I did previously, I'm going to describe what happened. And this transaction, I'm going to say this happened on Of course, in a real setting, I'd give what the date was on the problem, or else I would give on the date that it actually happened. So there's the date, May 6th. So there's my first two transactions, and from here on out, I'm just going to do the T accounts, and then I'm immediately going to do the general journal. So next, she paid $150 to put an ad in the paper. I can look at my chart of accounts, and since I'm using double entry, I'll need to hit two accounts. So put an ad in the paper. First thing here is that, well, cash went down. I paid her money. I now have less cash. But then there's another account here called advertising expense. So I'll take it to my T account here. Cash went down. There's a decrease to cash. And then since I'm using double entry, I'll put it on the other side and put it in advertising expense. So there it is in T account form, and now I'm going to put it on the general journal. Skip over here. Advertising expense is the debit. So I'm going to put that first. And the next account is cash. That one's second. And I'll put a new description here. I'll need to assign a date to this as well. I'll put this on the 7th. And you'll notice also in the date column, this is really handy, I put the year and then I put the month, and then I don't have to repeat that stuff over and over again. I just put the day in this third column here. So what's next? Felicia Jennings bought a truck. She paid $10,000 cash and got a loan for the remaining $5,000. This one here is a little bit more complicated. I'm going to skip one actually. No, I didn't. This transaction here is a little bit more complicated.